So I decided to leave the cold, miserable UK weather behind, and for Christmas I thought I'd go and explore a part of the world I've been wanting to get out to for a while. It's the Algarve. I thought I'd do a breakdown here on YouTube of the photos that I took, where I took them, and what I'd recommend if you were planning a visit to the same area. Okay, so the general idea for the trip was that I wanted to visit as many cool places as possible, grab some pictures, and also fly my drone. We're staying in Albufeira, and the tactic was to get slightly further away each day and visit a different cove or coastal point. So obviously we started at Albufeira beach, which was really lovely. Great views and super accessible from where we were staying.
Watermelon and lemon.
Next, we went to Praia de Arrifes and hiked down the coast a bit. This section of the coastline was one of my favourite parts, and I feel like it was really underrated. I didn't see much about this section online, but it was really photogenic and a nice place to spend an afternoon. We spent another day at Praia de Coelhe. This beach was also really nice. We stayed here for sunset and got some great pictures. Has a good mixture of rocks, caves, as well as of course beach. Now on Christmas Day we did a slightly bigger trip. We caught a bolt over to Algarve du Pontal and hiked from here all the way over to Arco de Albandeira. This was actually the busiest area that we saw on the entire trip. I think there were some locals who came down here for Christmas, and I can see why. It was really lovely. There's a small peninsula with an amazing sea arch that sticks out into the sea, and on either side of it there are two sandy beaches. We wanted to get a taxi back from here, but we called one and there were none available. So do be careful if this is your plan as well. But it ended okay, as from here we just walked back to our start point and got a taxi back from there, no problem. Now obviously we wanted to see the Benagil Cave. That's definitely the most popular and most famous landmark in the area. Unfortunately, the local government have closed the cave for visits. You're no longer allowed to disembark from a boat, and we wanted to do a kayaking tour, get off the boat and explore the cave and take some photos. This is no longer possible, and there are mixed messages online around what's being set up, whether it's a permit system, etc. We found that if you contact the individual tour operators, some of them say that they will be able to get you in there, and some say that they're not allowed. We did find one who promised us that we would be able to disembark. We tried to book it, and unfortunately the sea conditions on the days that we had available weren't good enough, and so we're unable to complete the trip. This was a bit of a bummer, so if it's something that you definitely want to see, make sure you plan that bit in advance. One final beach that we did visit was the Oura beach. This is close to Albufeira again, and is really nice. This was actually recommended to me by someone on Threads, and I'm really glad that we went. It's a little bit more commercial. There's a setup there with beach bars and restaurants that were still open at the time that we went in December, but it was really lovely. There's loads of sand. There are some really interesting rock formations that you can hike about. I got my drone up and got some great shots. Although I do have to say, a seagull did steal a piece of our food, and so that will forever tarnish my memory of this beach. We also did several day trips. We did one to Lagos, one to Faro, and one to Lisbon. If I had to rate them in order, I would say my favourite was Lagos, second favourite Lisbon, and least favourite Faro. For Lagos, we got a local train over, which was really convenient and really cheap. The city itself had a really cool vibe. It seemed like more of like a surfing type place. There were loads of nice cafes. Some of it was of course closed because we went in winter, but it was really worth a visit. Whilst we were there, we also did one of our favourite activities of the week, which was hiking out to Ponta de Piedra. This collection of rock formations is really stunning, and it's perfect for getting a drone up or taking some pictures. There's also the option to take a kayak down around the rocks at the bottom. We were going to do this, but in the end we kind of ran out of time, and there seemed to be quite a long queue on the steps down to it, so we thought we'd just give it a miss. We also visited Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. We caught a Flixbus from Albufeira directly and just did a day trip. It took around 2.5 hours each way. Lisbon was a much bigger city, which I guess we should have been expecting, but we weren't. I thought it would be a similar vibe to Porto, but instead it was much more commercial, much larger, and I didn't quite enjoy it as much as I did when I went to Porto. But I would recommend still visiting. It's obviously definitely a beautiful place, some really vibrant colours, and I have a whole separate video on my channel talking about our day trip to Lisbon that you can go and watch and see what we got up to. Finally, we did spend a day in Faro before we left for the airport. We got the train here as well. Faro seemed a bit bigger than Lagos and a little bit more commercial, It wasn't quite as charming, but we did enjoy a really nice walk down by the seafront and the train tracks. I definitely recommend walking around the old town if you happen to be here for a couple of hours. Okay, let's talk about some bits and pieces around organisation. So when did we go? Now, as I mentioned, we made the decision to go in December. We were worried that some things will be shut, but I think it was actually a really viable time to go. Obviously, we had some time off for Christmas, which we used to get the holiday there. I feel like it was also a great decision to go at this time because the place was mostly empty and it kind of felt like we had everything to ourselves. We completely avoided any crowds and everything was relatively cheaper than it would be in the summer. The weather was pretty nice. On most days it was close to 20 degrees. It was kind of t-shirt in the sun and throw a hoodie on in the shade type weather. But of course the sea temperature was quite cold, so there was limited swimming from us. Where do we stay? I mentioned we stayed in Albufeira. I told this to like a number of my friends and they all gave me the same look, like, are you sure? They told me it was kind of like a party and like a raging alcohol destination, which didn't quite match up with the trip that I was hoping to have. Now apparently in the summer it is kind of like a party pumping place, but when we went in the winter it was actually really nice and really chilled. It was just a bunch of families having a nice time and enjoying themselves. Most of the people there were locals. It just seemed like a sleepy little village on the coast in Portugal, which was perfect for what we wanted. We stayed at the Club Garden de Albufeira. We had a fully furnished apartment with a kitchen and everything we needed for 10 days. The showers there were brilliant. We had a huge balcony as well. It was a little bit away from the coast and a little bit outside the village, but it was a simple taxi ride into town. It was very cheap, very convenient, and I'd highly recommend staying here if you're thinking of going there as well. Finally, transport. I feel like the biggest decision we had to make regarding this trip was whether we had to rent a car or not. Now obviously for photography, renting a car is really convenient because you can turn up to the exact place that you want to go at the exact time. So I could catch the sunset or the sunrise on any different beach that I wanted. But we actually made the decision not to rent a car for a couple of reasons. One, we didn't really want the hassle. This was meant to be a relaxing holiday. Two, we didn't really want to deal with a rental car company. Three, we thought it would add extra expense. So instead, for travel, we used a combination of public transport. We took some trains into the bigger towns and cities that were near us, as well as using Bolt. I feel like Bolt is much better than Uber over there. It was really cheap. From where we're staying to the nearest beach was about €3. Some of the further trips that we did were about 10 or 15 each way. But I really feel like over time, it added up on all of those days, and it was still probably much cheaper than the cost of the car, the insurance and the fuel put together. So I'm really happy that we made that decision in the end. The only time that we failed to get a Bolt from anywhere was on Christmas Day when we wanted to get that Bolt back from our hike, but disaster was kind of averted. We just hiked back to the nearest town where we started the hike, and after that we were able to get a Bolt just fine. So I hope this video was really useful if you're planning a trip to the Algarve or Albufeira. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'd be happy to dive into them. And there's a bunch of resources in the description box as well. Thanks for watching, subscribe here if you're new, and I'll see you next time.